Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of our discussion of ser and estar, two verbs of being in Spanish. I wanted to point out that estar actually comes from a Latin verb that means to stand, which was not a copula, and then just over the years it obtained copula status. Until now, it's one of the big two. So, if you're a verb that's not a copula, hang in there, because eventually you might be. It could happen to you. Just wanted to point out again that the copula expresses that something is something else, but there's a lot of ways to say that something is something without using the word is. We kind of talked about ways to say I am tired without using the word am, and here's just a couple more. Tener is an interesting one, to say that you have something. A lot of times, instead of saying we are homeowners, you could say we have a house. So it's interesting that the verb to have a lot of times is a way around using the copula. Keep an eye open for that. Also that last one, verbs of appearance, instead of saying it is hot, you can say it feels hot. Or, instead of saying she is beautiful, you can say she looks beautiful. So, a lot of different ways around the copula. So when do you use ser and when do you use estar? First of all, it's probably best not to think of these as rules that were invented by the wizards of language, because they're not. They kind of evolved over thousands of years. But there is that general thing about estar being for statuses and ser being for natures or permanent nature, and so those that'll help you make sense of why sucio, just for example here. If you say estoy sucio, I mean right now I'm dirty. But if you say soy sucio, it's just by nature or by habit. It's just I'm a dirty guy. That's what I do. I like to play in the mud. I'm going down to viejo towards the middle or guapo towards the bottom. If you say soy viejo or soy guapo, you're saying I am old or I am handsome. That's who I am. But use it with a star, and él está viejo or él está guapo. That would be for a temporary. He looks handsome in that shirt, or she looked lovely last night, or he seems old because of he's under a lot of stress recently, and so está viejo, not just s. And it's good looking at these charts is a good way to kind of get a grasp of the difference between the two verbs. But if you think of these as rules, then you got to start learning what are the exceptions to these rules. But they're not really rules. I mean, it's not somebody decided, hey, let's have two different copulas and let's decide when to use one and when to use the other. It kind of gradually evolved. And even with verbs adjectives like casado, meaning married, sometimes people say estoy casado, I am married, and sometimes they say soy. So it's still evolving, and it's different from place to place. But if you think of them as guidelines, then you don't have to make up all these crazy explanations of why it's correct to say está muerto instead of es muerto, even though dead is a pretty permanent state. Hoy es lunes, today is Monday, because that's what today is. But tomorrow is not going to be Monday. But I guess you could say that this day that we're in is always going to be Monday, even when we're not in it anymore. Kind of like a room that we've left. We're leaving this day behind, and this day is going to be Monday. Occupations, you always use ser, even though you might change occupations, or even though for an occupation like student, it's by nature temporary. At least one would hope. And then because possessions, you use ser to say this is my pen, or this is my house. Even though you might only have a chair for an hour in a class, or you might only have a seat on the bus for 5 minutes, you still use ser. So I guess my point is that the best way to learn these is just kind of to read the rules a couple times and get a feel for them, and then as you're reading stuff in Spanish, to just sort of see anytime you see a ser or an estar, ask yourself, why did they use this one instead of the other one? Or, can you imagine what the sentence would mean if you used the other one? And just kind of build your database as you go. So there you go. Have fun with it. Don't worry too much about it. We use all the fancy words like copula and stuff just because we think they're interesting. It shouldn't be intimidating. It's, I guess, it should be rewarding because it kind of changes the way that you look at stuff and opens your mind. And, that's priceless. So have fun with it. Peace out.